The city began not with streets or squares, but with its walls. Rising from earth-thick stone giants, they crowned hills and ringed valleys, their towers catching light of dawn. To see walls after a long road was to feel awe, relief, and a measure of fear, for within lay another world. Travelers approached slowly, pilgrims with staffs, merchants with carts, peasants carrying baskets of grain, all tethered at gates, waiting for guards to open heavy doors of oak and iron. The creak of hinges rocked threshold between open countryside and ordered city. The gates were both welcome and barrier. They promised safety from raiders, wolves, and war, yet demanded tolls, oaths, and inspection. Guards peered at faces, weighed goods, asked questions. To pass through was not right, but privilege, granted by city. Watch. Above, battlements rose, archers leaned lazily, flags flapped in wind, watchmen called to one another. The walls spoke of power. The city could defend itself, could close its gates at dusk, could keep the world at bay. Morning brought busiest scenes, carts loaded with hay or timber, barrels of ale, sacks of flour, all queued before gatehouse. Donkeys brayed, oxen snorted, children tugged mothers' skirts. The air was thick with dust and noise. At midday, pilgrims clustered. Some carried scallop shells of Santiago, badges of Canterbury, others simple crosses cut from wood. They waited for blessing before entering, seeing city sees holy space. Ains Muchman. Strangers drew suspicion, a traveler in foreign cloak, a merchant with silks of bright color, a jugged leading monkey on rope, all drew stares. The gate was meeting fate of worlds, with new faces startled and fascinated. Within gatehouse, portcullis stood heavy, ready to fall in danger. Chains rattled, iron gleamed, torchlight flickered on stone. To step beneath was to feel shadow of power above. Children often played nearby, darting between carts, begging coins from travelers, laughing at guards. Their voices softened sternness of gate, proving life flowed even in stone shadow. By dusk, gates closed. Watchmen shouted last calls, travelers hurried in, stragglers left outside until dawn. Iron clanged, wood groaned, and city became fortress, sealed against night. In storm, gates sheltered those caught on road. Merchants huddled beneath arches, pilgrims prayed, beggars curled against stone. The gate was not only barrier but refuge, wall between chaos and safety. Festivals transformed the threshold. Flowers hung from towers, banners streamed, trumpets sounded bents, nobles entered in procession. The same gates that barred strangers became doors of triumph for city pride. Stories clung to walls. Some said saints had walked through in disguise, blessing those who helped them. Others whispered of enemies repelled, arrows raining from battlements. Memory and legend made stone alive. For villagers arriving from fields, the gates rocked, Change of world outside lay huts and meadows, inside lay trade, craft and power. Passing through was like crossing into another life. Children remembered first entry forever. The looming towers, echo of hooves on drawbridge, thunder of doors closing behind. The city sighs, smell, and noise began with that first breath at the gate. So the city life began each day at its gates. They were mouths through which goods and people flowed, eyes through which city watched world, and arms that could close to hold life safe within. The city gates were not only stone and wood, but symbols of power, of welcome, of fear, of belonging. To pass beneath them was to step into heart of medieval life. The city heart was not its lofty towers or stone squares, but its streets, narrow, winding, alive with the pulse of daily life. To wander them was to feel the city breathe, the press of bodies, the X of hooves, the cries of merchants, and the mingling of scents both sweet and foul. The streets twisted without order. Some ran like veins to Market Square, others meandered in crooked loops, ending suddenly at walls or courtyards. Houses leaned overhead, timber frames jutting so far that neighbors could nearly shake hands. From windows across lanes, light fell in shafts, leaving much of street in shadow. Cobblestones rang with sound, iron-shod hooves struck sparks, wooden wheels rumbled, voices cawed, bare feet slapped stone, dogs barked, vendors shouted their wares. The city was never silent, never still. Smells struck the nose, strongly lights met the eye. From one doorway drifted bread baking, from another the tang of tanned hides. Fishmongers' stalls reek of river catch, spice sellers perfumed alleys with cinnamon and pepper, yet dung lay in gutters, refuse piled in corners, smoke drifted from chimneys. The city fragrance was both feast and foulness. Children darted through lanes, sparrows they chased hoops, skipped with cords, splashed in puddles. Their laughter mingled with curses of cart drivers, shouts of traders, toll of bells. For them, even crowded streets were playgrounds. Vendors filled every corner. A woman sold apples from basket, calling prices best. Children tugged at sleeves. A man balanced eels in tub of water, slapping sides to show freshness. Cloth sellers hung bright fabrics from beams, creating curtains of color between houses. Water carriers trod steadily, balancing yokes on shoulders, buckets slossing. They shouted warnings they passed, for spillage was costly, and water dear within crowded city. In narrow lanes craftsmen worked before open doors, a shoemaker bent over leather, hammer tapping, a tailor cut cloth, needle flashing in light. A smith struck sparks from iron in forge that filled street with glow and heat. Crows pressed thread, peasants with baskets jostled merchants with ledgers, friars in brown habits brushed against nobles in bright cloaks. No lane was wide enough to keep worlds apart. The city forced mingling, blending high and low. At every crossing stood wells or fountains, women will to fill pitchers, gossip spilling Vilivi's water, stories of neighbors, news of markets, warnings of sickness, all shared vase hands hauled ropes and buckets. The poor clustered in alleys, tenements leaned precariously, beams patched with scraps, roofs sagging. Children sat on steps, eating crusts of bread, watching richer passers-by with hungry eyes. Their laughter was thinner but no less real. The wealthy moved with caution. Servants cleared paths. Guards carried staves. Carriages rumbled, wheels splashing mud onto walls. Rich cloaks trailed, shoes gleamed, yet even he, dirt and noise would not be kept away. Animals filled streets much Prayaga, rooted in refuse, geese honked, donkeys brayed, horses neighed impatiently, chickens scattered before carts, dogs prowled for scraps. The city was so much barnyard des market. Bells tolled from towers, marking hours, their sound cut through clamor, calling prayers, ending trades, beginning festivals. Children learned to measure day by bells more than by sun. At midday, sunlight struck higher beams, turning timber and plaster into gold and white. Shadows shifted, hawkers grew louder, and the press of life thickened. By dusk, lamps were lit at corners, their glow soft but welcome against creeping dark. Night transformed streets, laughter from taverns spilled into alleys, watchmen patrolled with lanterns, beggars huddled against doors. Some streets grew quiet, others pulsed louder, music and dice ringing from inns. Then the festivals filled streets with color, banners hung between houses, flowers scattered, jugglers performed at corners, crowds surged, children sang, vendors sold sweets and ribbons, lanes that once stank of refuse turned into rivers of light and joy. In storms, streets turned into streams, gutters overflowed, mud rose, carts stuck in mire. Children splashed in joy while merchants cursed, pulling goods from flood. The city endured, always noisy, always alive. Walls bore marks of life, graffiti scratched by knives, saints painted in niches, charms hung against plague. Each door told story, iron knockers for wealthy, plain wood for poor, symbols carved for guilds. Neighbors leaned from windows, gossiping across narrow lanes. Voices rose above carts, cats prowled along roofs, laughter and quarrels carried between floors. Privacy was rare, community constant. At dawn, lanes were swept clean, vendors set up, animals driven through gates. The streets awoke like living creature, stretching, yawning, filling with motion. By night they slept, only watchmen and shadows wandering. For the traveler, streets were bewildering, narrow, twisting, crowded, smelly, yet alive with marvel. Each turn revealed new site, shrine, workshop, tavern, fountain. To walk them was to learn soul of city. Children remembered first glimpse forever, the colors of cloth, the cries of hawkers, the scents of bread and dung together. For them, streets were not confusing but wondrous, paths of endless discovery. So the streets and lanes were veins of city, carrying life through its body. They were humble and grand, foul and fair, dangerous and delightful. In them, medieval towns revealed their truest face. All streets led to the market square. It was the city heart, broad space, paved with cobbles, surrounded by guild halls, churches, and tall houses. Here the life of town pulsed strongest, a river of trade, gossip, color, and sound. The square awoke early. Before dawn, carts creaked in, laden with baskets of apples, sacks of flour, barrels of ale. Merchants set up stalls, hammering boards, stretching awns, hanging goods for display. By sunrise, the square was alive with clatter and calls. Stalls crowded every side, butchers hung cuts of meat, their cleavers flashing. Bakers piled loaves golden from ovens, steam rising into crisp morning. Spice sellers opens boxes of cinnamon, nutmeg, and pepper, scents drifting through air like promise of distant lands. Cloth merchants hung bright fabrics from poles, scarlets, blues, and greens fluttering like banners. Cobblers lined boots in neat rows, potters stacked jugs and bowls, coopers showed barrels tight with iron hoops. Each trade filled square with shape and color. Voices never ceased. Vendors cried prices, customers argued, children shouted, gossip spread quicker than goods. News of war, rumor of famine, word of a saint relic, all carried from mouth to mouth the wildfire. Animals added their chorus, pea choiled, geese squealed, geese honked, oxen lowered, dogs barked, hooves struck stone, carts rattled. The market was symphony of chaos, every note clamoring at once. In middle of square stood well or fountain, women and idle with pitchers, filling them while exchanging stories. The well was not only source of water but hub of news, a place where every household voice was heard. Guild halls overlooked square, their carved timbers and painted shields showed pride of craftsmen, bakers, weavers, smiths, merchants. From their windows hung banners reminding all who passed that the city's strength lay in its guilds. Children ran through crowds, clutching small coins for sweets. They tugged at sleeves for honey cakes, candied nuts, roasted apples. Their laughter rose above quarrels, proof that market held delight well-led labor. Jugglers and minstrels performed at edges. A man tossed knives, drawing gasps. A boy played pipe, tune high and quick. Crowds paused, tossing coins, glad for marvel in midst of bargaining. Beggars sat at corners, bowls before them. Their cries mingled with merchants pleading for alms. Some passers-by tossed coins, others hurried past. Even in market abundance, poverty was plain. Church towers rose above square, Bells tolled hours, pause and trade for prayer. Priests walked among stalls, blessing goods, reminding buyers of holy days. Religion wove through market, thread through cloth. Smells mingled thickly, fresh bread, frying fish, roasting meat, but also dung, smoke, and sweat. Fragrance and foulness were inseparable. Market Square, a place of both hunger and satisfaction. Nobles passed with retinues, their fine cloaks brushing against peasants' rough tunics. Merchants bowed low, peasants stared, children pointed. The square rode our classes together, if only for a moment. Coins clinked constantly. Silver pennies passed from hand to hand. Scales weighed goods. Purses jingled. Trade was lifeblood, and then it flowed freely, richer than in any lane. The lifters transformed square into stage. Mystery plays were acted on wagons, telling tales of creation, saints, and judgment. Crowds cheered, laughed, wept, and prayed, faith and theater mingling in one place. Markets shifted with seasons. In spring, stalls brimmed with greens, herbs, and flowers. Summer wrought berries, bright cloths, and fish fresh from rivers. Autumn filled square with grain, cider, and apples. Winter offered smoked meats, wool cloaks, hot chestnuts. Children remembered fairs most vividly. Puppet shows, ribbon sellers, toy stalls, jugglers, dancers, wonders crowded every corner. For them, market was not only trade but magic, memory that lasted a lifetime. Enlisted were frequent buyers, argued with sellers, apprentices fought in corners, guild masters enforced rules. The square was court as much, and market ways, justice and quarrel alike were public. At dusk, stalls closed, boards folded, carts loaded, refuse left behind, beggars that scraps, children lingered, dogs scavenged. The square grew quieter, echo of day fading. Night brought you live lanterns, lit taverns and square. Voices rose in song and dice. Guards patrolled, shadows deepened, but square never slept fully, even in dark life murmured. Through centuries, Market Square remained unchanged. New goods arrived, new guilds rose, new faces appeared, but rhythm of trade, gossip, and laughter endured. For medieval townsfolk, the market square was more than space. It was heart of community, mirror of city, stage of life. Here the world met in stone and sound. So to stand in medieval market square was to stand in crossroads of humanity. Hunger met abundance, poverty met wealth, faith met laughter, and life itself pulsed without pause. If the market square was the heart of the city, the guilds were its hands. They shaped wood, cloth, leather, iron, and stone. They baked bread, brewed ale, forged tools, carved ornaments, stitched garments, and built houses. The crafts of guilds gave the city its strength, its wealth, and its pride. Guild halls stood proudly near market. Tall timbered buildings with carved beams, painted shields, and broad doors rocked the place with craftsmen. Their banners showed symbols of trade, a hammer for smiths, a loaf for bakers, a shuttle for weavers, a tankard for brewers. Each guild claimed its place, its honor visible to all. Apprenticeship was the path for most. A boy of 7 or 8 might be given by his family to a master. He left home to live under his master roof, to serve and to learn. At first his duties were humble, sweeping floors, fetching water, carrying wood. Yet every task was lesson, shaping obedience and patience. As years passed, apprentices handled tools. A boy learned to shape wood with plane, to hammer nails straight, to stir molten metal in forge. He watched, imitated, repeated until skill grew into habit. A girl apprenticed to a weaver might wind yarn, watch loom, carry shuttles. Her hands learned rhythm of craft, surely thus her ears learned rhythm of song. Journeymen came next, those who had finished apprenticeship but not yet earned mastery. They traveled from city to city, seeking work, learning new techniques, broadening knowledge. Their hands bore marks of men forges, looms, and kitchens. Journeymen carried not only skill but stories, spreading news between towns. Masters were proudest of all. To become master, one had to prove worth with a masterpiece, a chest carved with precision, a blade forged without flaw, a garment sewed with elegance. If guild judged it worthy, craftsmen earned title of master, right to open shop, right to take apprentices. Guilds guarded quality fiercely. No baker could sell bread lighter than law allowed. No smith could forge blade that snapped too easily. No brewer good water ale. Inspectors walked streets, checking wares, punishing cheats. Guild pride ensured reputation, for city honor was bound to its crafts. Festivals showed guild strength. Each trade carried banners in processions, their members marching proudly in aprons and cloaks, tools or loaves or cups held high. Bells rang, crowds cheered, guilds proved their unity to all. Guild halls were more than workplaces. They were centers of fellowship. Masters dined together, journeymen met, apprentices listened at benches. Their debts were settled, quarrels judged, marriages arranged. Guilds were families beyond blood. Some guilds grew wealthy, merchants trading cloth, spices, and wine built fortunes. Their guild halls glittered with carved stone, their coffers heavy with coin. They lent money, funded cathedrals, and influenced rulers. To belong to merchant guild was to wield power well as trade. Other guilds were humbler, smiths, cobblers, coopers. Their work was essential, but their wealth modest, yet their pride was no less. A shoemaker boots, a cooper barrels, a smith nails, all were lifeblood of city. Apprenticeship was hard, life, food was plain, sleep brief, discipline strict. Beatings were not uncommon, yet apprentices also found camaraderie, laughter at benches, songs sung in workshops, secrets whispered by fire. Journeymen dreamed of mastery, but years of toil lay ahead. They shared lodgings, played dice in taverns, sometimes quarreled fiercely, yet bonds formed strong, friendships lasting through travels and trades. Masters held authority, but also burden. They must train apprentices, pay dues, guard quality, represent guild and council. Their honor was bound to every piece they sold. A flaw shamed not only man but guild entire. Guilds shaped more than work. They cared for widows, buried dead, helped sick. When plague struck, guilds to pray, to give alms, to tend ill. Brotherhood and charity bound them together. Children dreamed of guilds. Boys carved sticks into swords, played at smiths with stones, pretended to be bakers kneading mud. Girls braided yarn, sew scraps, played at brewing herbs. Play rehearsed future. Surely the apprenticeships did. The mer is the rouge, the nef lieslik and long human plum, fools collating. Smiths sang to hammer rhythm, weavers chanted with shuttles, bakers sang they needed, work became music, music became pride, pride became legacy. In taverns, guild members, dead at night, they drank late, sang songs, debated rules, planned festivals. Laughter and quarrels mingled, yet unity endured. For our disputes, guilds stood firm against outsiders. Guilds also held power in city councils. Masters sat aldermen, advised mayors, decided taxes. They shaped laws, guarded rights, and defended privileges fiercely. City was ruled not only by lords but by guilds' will. Mystery plays often fell to guilds. Each trade staged a scene. Bakers showed Last Supper with loaves. Smiths forged nails of crucifixion. Fishmongers told of Jonah and whale. Pride and piety mingled. Crafts honored through drama. Guild marks were everywhere. Bread stamped with cross of bakers, cloth rocked with seal of weavers, barrels branded with cooper sign. These marks were signatures, proof of honesty, symbols of trust. Not all were admitted easily. Foreigners, Jews, Winn, many were excluded or restricted. Guilds guarded privilege, housed wa etsai mto. The peel and wang, seen in mind that it takes the hell, joke on divide the life. May you durate, mels fry mauyale win off, sauce and pass the twelfth walk. Not all were admitted easily. Foreigners, Jews, Winn, many were excluded or restricted. Guilds guarded privilege, house wa etsai mto. There will be no rush. We will move slowly, pausing often, noticing details, and lingering on the small things that made up ordinary life. Perhaps as you listen, you will feel your eyes grow heavy. Perhaps the slow rhythm of the words will carry you into sleep. That is perfectly fine. The past will still be here when you wake. We begin with the landscape itself. Medieval Europe was a world of villages and fields, rolling countryside divided by narrow dirt paths, rivers winding quietly through forests, and clusters of small houses where people gathered together for safety and for community. The village was the heart of life for most people. Cities existed, but they were rare, and only a small portion of the population ever lived in them. Noticing details and lingering on the small things that made up ordinary life. Perhaps as you listen, you will feel your eyes grow heavy. Perhaps the slow rhythm of the words will carry you into sleep. That is perfectly fine. Yet even those excluded shaped city. Women spun, brewed, healed, even if guilds denied title. Foreign merchants bought silks and spices, though barred from halls. The city breathed through all hands, gilded or not. Festivals ended with feasts. Masters sat at high tables, journeymen below, apprentices serving. Ale flowed, songs rose, toasts rang, pride glowed bright, fellowship warm, for guild was family that endured beyond kin. Thus guilds and crafts were bones of city. They gave it strength, shape, and pride. Their banners waved above markets. Their songs rang in workshops. Their hands shaped every stone, loaf, and cloth. So the medieval city lived through its guilds, proud, disciplined, noisy, and enduring. To walk its streets was to hear hammer, shuttle, and bellows, to see banners of trades, to taste bread of bakers, to know city living workshop, bound by brotherhood of craft. Beyond crowded alleys and smoky workshops rose the tall houses of the wealthy, merchants, guild masters, and prosperous citizens built homes that loomed above streets, their timber frames strong, their painted walls bright. These townhouses were symbols of fortune and pride, standing in sharp contrast to humble cottages pressed into alleys. From outside, grandeur was plain. Upper floors jutted above lower, their beams carved with vines, beasts and saints. Windows rare in poorer homes gleamed with colored glass or latticed shutters. Doors were broad and studded with iron, knockers shaped like lions or angels. To pass such a house was to see wealth displayed for all eyes. Inside, space opened wide. A stone hall stretched long, its beams heavy, its walls hung with tapestries. Sunlight streamed through high windows, glinting on polished tables and brass candlesticks. Here guests were welcomed, business transacted, feasts celebrated. The hall was both heart and stage, where family honor was displayed. Merchants filled their halls with trophies of trade, chests carved with foreign signs, bolts of silk from east, barrels of spice from south, goblets of silver from distant lands. Wealth was not hidden but displayed proudly, proof of success, lure for future deals. Private chambers lay above, beds stood high, carved of oak, layered with feather mattresses and linen sheets. Curtains hung for warmth and privacy. Painted chests held clothing of wool and velvet. Walls bore frescoes or painted boards, saints, flowers, and scenes of hunts. Compared to straw beds of poor, these rooms seemed palaces. Servants bustled constantly, boys fetched water from wells, girls tended fires, cooks stirred pots in kitchens below. A wealthy house was hive of labor, every floor alive with footsteps, every chamber filled with duty. Kitchens spread wide, fires burned in great hearths, spits turned with meats, pots simmered with stews, tables groaned with bread, cheese, fish, and fowl. The scent of herbs, onions, and roasting filled corridors, drifting upward to halls above. Cellars lay beneath, bars of ale and wine lined walls, sacks of grain filled bins, salted fish and meat hung in storage. Wealth meant security. To have cellar full was to stand firm against famine. Chapel rooms were common. A corner chamber held altar, crucifix, and candles. Families these for morning prayer. Priests blessed meals. Saints' days were honored at hope. Piety stood beside wealth, for faith was duty of fortunate. Children of wealthy lived differently. Their toys were finer, carved dolls, painted whistles, balls of leather soap. With care, tutors taught them letters and psalms, sometimes even Latin or arithmetic. Their futures stretched wider, shaped by fortune and knowledge. Festivals transformed houses, windows hung with banners, halls filled with musicians, guests feasted at long table. Wine poured, laughter rose, dancers spun across floors. The townhouse became theater of joy, showing neighbors the family wealth and generosity. Business off ruled halls, merchants counted coins on tails, spread ledgers, signed contracts, deals for wool, grain, and spice were made beneath beams these children once played. Wealth was woven through family, tightly these love. Gardens sometimes nestled behind, small plots enclosed by stone or timber walls grew herbs, roses, and fruit trees. Children played there safely. Wind gathered herbs, men walked in evening calm. Even in city heart, a patch of earth gave peace. Neighbors envied and admired, poor passed by, glancing upward, dreaming of warmth beyond their reach. Yet wealthy houses also bore duty to give alms, to host feasts, to employ servants. Wealth carried responsibility, not only luxury. At night, candles filled chambers with glow. Shadows flickered on carved beams, gold and silver gleamed. Prayers were whispered before sleep. Outside streets darkened, but within, warmth and light endured. Illness and sorrow entered even these homes. Beds rich with linen, but still cradle fever. Halls with weeping. Wealth softened hardship, but did not remove it. Families prayed. Dead all families did for mercy and healing. Fires were constant threat. A fickle spark could consume wealth in minutes. Buckets stood ready. Servants kept watch. Even richest house trembled before danger of flame. Weddings filled halls with splendor. Guests in bright gowns, minstrels singing, priests blessing unions. Gold rings gleamed, bread and wine flowed, laughter shook beams. Such moments displayed family status to all city. Funerals, too, passed through doors. Candles lit paths, mourners whispered prayers, coffins were carried out beneath carved beams. Wealth could not bar death, but could cloak sorrow in ceremony. Walls bore paintings of saints and legends. Guests saw not only family riches, but their faith. Wealth displayed devotion as Haunchon's comfort, for reputation demanded piety. Towers rose above hams. From their windows, families leaped over roofs and streets, hearing bells, watching markets, glimpsing horizon beyond walls. Height gave pride, vision, and reminder of city breadth. Evening meals were grand. Servants laid trenchers of bread, poured ale and wine, set dishes of meat and fish. Children learned manners, when to bow, when to speak, when to be silent. Etiquette was lessoned at each foot. Guild masters held councils in such halls. Rules were written, fines settled, apprentices admitted. Wealthy homes became places of decision, shaping city laws within timbered walls. Music filled evenings, lutes strummed, voices sang, harps chimed. Wealth bought instruments, hired minstrels, encouraged song. Children listened wide-eyed, absorbing beauty part of life. Winter nights glowed warmly. Fires roared in hearths, shutters kept cold at bay, fur-lined cloaks wrapped shoulders. Outside snow drifted, but inside all was comfort, laughter, and prayer. Summer bow open windows, breezes carrying scents of markets. Families sat in gardens, drank wine cooled from cellar. Watch stars above towers, city life softened by wealth felt almost like peace. Yet, even in luxury, humility was praised. Priests reminded families wealth was gift, all fortune fleeting. Tapestries, silver, gardens, all would fade, but charity endured. Thus, townhouses of wealthy were not only shelters, but symbols. They spoke of power, pride, family, faith, and fragility. They stood tall above streets, reminders of fortune and duty alike. So the medieval city rose not only with walls and markets, but with houses of its wealthy, carved beams against sky, halls filled with light, lives woven of gold and prayer. Not Don, who lived behind the city walls, dwelt in lofty houses with painted beams. For most, life was harder, closer to the ground, and pressed into narrow alleys where smoke hung thick and space was scarce. The poor gave the city its pulse, fade surely, as the wealthy gave it shine. Homes of the poor were small, often a single room for an entire family. Walls leaned, roofs sagged, floors were packed earth or rough boards. Light came from rushlights or narrow slits for windows. Furniture was sparse, a table, a bench, a chest, a straw bed shared by many. Crowding was constant. Several families might share a sill tenement, each with corner or loft claimed by blankets. Children slept close together for warmth, their breathing mingling in dark. Privacy was unknown, but closeness bred bonds in much burden. Smoke-filled rooms, hearths burned low. Fuel was costly, so fires were small, and smoke lingered in rafters. Eyes stung, clothes absorbed scent, lungs carried coughs. Yet without fire, cold bit deeper still. Meals were simple: porridge of oats or barley, black bread made from rye, onions or beans stewed in pots. Meat was rare, fish occasional, cheese a treat. When harvests failed or prices rose, bellies grew lean, hunger constant companion. Water was fetched from wells, sometimes far. Children carried buckets, slopping precious drops onto cobbles. Wells were places of gossip and quarrel, but also danger. In times of plague, water was feared much with famine. Clothing was patched and worn, tunics passed from elder to younger. Boots mended end until leather gave way. Mothers spun wool, daughters sew, sons wore garments until threadbare. Bright dye were luxury most, wore brown, gray, and earth tones. Work filled every day. Men lab-eyed porters carrying loads for merchants, day laborers hired for fields or building sailors, smiths or coopers, helpers, women spun, washed loaves for others, nursed brewed ale to sell by cup. Even children begged or worked small tasks, earning coins to keep hunger away. Markets offered chance, but little comfort. Poor bought eggs, onions, baskets, or small wares to sell. They stood beside wealthy merchants, their goods meager, their voices softer, yet even a handful of pennies might buy bread enough for family. The disease struck hardest heat. Narrow alleys held stagnant air. Refuse piled high, vermin scurried in dark. Plague spread swiftly, fevers ran unchecked, children weakened. First families prayed, neighbors helped, but sorrow was frequent guest. Despite hardship, laughter endured. Children played with hoops of billow, dolls of cloth, balls of rags. They ran through alleys, chased chickens, sang rhymes. Their joy needed little coin, only space and companionship. Neighbors shared burdens. When bread was scarce, crusts were divided. When illness struck, herbs and prayers were offered. Poor lived in closeness that bred both quarrels and care. Survival tied to one another. Festivals gave respite. Even the poorest shared in joy of maypoles, processions, and mystery plays. A honey cake or sweet nut bought with a silk coin became feast in itself, delight remembered long after hunger returned. Religion was anchor. Parish churches welcomed poor souls rich. Candles were lit, prayers whispered, saints invoked for mercy. Alms were given, sometimes bread distributed at doors. For poor, faith was hope, Pa's hope paid much duty. Beggars lived on streets themselves. Some were crippled, blind, and simply without work. They sat by churches and markets, bowls before them, voices calling for alms. Children watched with pity and fear, learning fragility of fortune. Servants lived between worlds. They dwelt in wealthy houses, but slept in kitchens or lofts, ate plain bread while serving feasts, worked long hours without rest. Their lot was hard yet steadier than hunger of streets. Night in poor quarters was restless. Families lay in straw, listening to coughs, snores, and cries of infants. Rats scurried, wind whistled through gaps, dogs barked in alleys. Yet sleep came, for labor demanded it, and morning always returned. Dreams reached beyond walls. Children of poor dreamed of guilds, of land, of ships, of miracles. They whispered hopes to one another in dark, their imagination brighter than rooms they lay in. Sometimes fortune shifted. A laborer gained steady work. A brewer ale grew hall. A washerwoman married well. Small steps lifted are from poverty, though many remained bound to narrow lanes. Fires were constant threat. Tenements of timber burned swiftly, flames leaping from roof to roof. Poor lost what little they had in minutes, left with only clothes they wore. Neighbors rebuilt, sharing labor, proving resilience stronger than loss. Charity softened hardship. Guilds offered alms, wealthy families gave bread, monasteries fed hungry at doors. Such gifts did not erase poverty, but they sustained bodies and reminded poor that they too were part of city. Children bore hardship most bravely. Their laughter rang loudest, their games filled alleys, their resilience carried families. Even in hunger they found joy in song, companionship in play, hope in stories of saints. So the life of poor, though harsh, was rich in bonds of family, neighbor, and faith. They endured smoke, hunger, and sorrow, yet carried strength born of necessity and love. The city would not live without them. They built walls, carried goods, baked bread, spun wool, raised children who in time became workers, servants, even masters. The poor were foundation beneath wealth, unseen but essential. Thus life of poor was hard yet holy in its own way. Their prayers rose with smoke of hearths. Their laughter echoed through alleys. Their resilience gave city its soul. No matter how narrow the lanes or how tall the houses, the church always rose above them. Its towers and spires stretched higher than rooftops. Its bells carried farther than cries of merchants. In the medieval city, the church was not only a bell of stone, it was the anchor of time, the keeper of memory, and the heart of faith. The cathedral dominated skyline, its walls loomed vast, its windows glowed with colored glass, its doors carved with saints and angels. To approach was to feel small, as if heaven itself leaned down to earth. Even the poorest paused at its threshold, whispering prayer before stepping within. Parish churches filled every quarter. Some were humble, their walls of rough stone, their altars simple wood. Others were grander, with painted beams and gilded crosses. Wherever one lived, the sound of bells was never far. They told hours of prayer, rocked holy days, and called people to Mass. Inside, air smelled of incense and wax. Candles flickered, their light reflected in brass and silver. Floors were worn by countless knees, walls painted with saints, ceilings high dreams. Music of chant echoed, filling space with solemn beauty. Children came often. They watched mothers light candles, fathers bow heads, priests raise chalices. They learned prayers long before letters, gestures long before books. For them, church was world of wonder, light, sound, and mystery. Festivals filled streets with processions. Banners waved, relics carried in silver cases. Choirs sang hymns, crowds knelt, priests passed, incense drifted in air, bells pealed from towers. Faith spilled from church into city, blessing cobbles and cottages alike. Cathedrals were built slowly, sometimes across centuries. Children who played in their shadow grew old before towers were finished. Stone by stone, generation by generation, faith became monument of patience and devotion. Guilds played their part, bakers donated loaves, masons carved saints, weavers stitched banners, every trade gave gift. Seeing church sees mirror of their craft. Their marks can still be found carved into hidden corners, pride made permanent in stone. Alms were given at church doors, beggars knelt, bowls outstretched, voices pleading. Priests reminded wealthy that charity was duty, that bread in coins given he counted nen treasure stored in heaven. Confession bound city to thee, rich and poor knelt alike, whispering sins, receiving absolution. Behind screen, all were equal in frailty, all received same mercy. Church was great leveler, humbling, proud, and lifting meek. Bells measured life. They rang at dawn for matins, at noon for angelus, at dusk for vespers. They told weddings with joy, funerals with sorrow, alarms in fire or war. The rhythm of city was set by their sound. Monasteries stood at edges, their garden green with herbs, their cloisters echoing with psalms. Monks copied books, brewed ale, and taught children. Their silence and discipline offered refuge from noise of markets. Schools grew beside churches. Boys scratched letters on wax tablets. Choristers sang psalms. Art destined for priesthood. Knowledge flowed from altars, zvachvin from masters of craft. Churches sheltered weary. Travelers slept in porches. Widows found rest. Orphans found care. Doors were open, candles lit, prayers constant. Sanctuary was more than law, it was heartbeat of mercy. Art filled sacred walls. Stained glass blazed with colors of saints and stories, kings kneeling before Christ, angels trumpeting, devils dragged into hell. Poor who could not read found whole Bibles shining in windows. Choirs raised voices, Boys' trebles soaring, monks' basses grounding, chant flowed thick river, steady, timeless. Even those who did not understand Latin felt peace in rhythm and sound. Pilgrims brought relics, bones of saints, drops of holy blood, splinters of cross, each drew crowds. Markets swelled when relics were shown, coins given, candles lit, prayers whispered fervently. Church governed life beyond prayer. Councils met in cloisters, decrees read from pulpits, taxes collected at doors. Law and faith mingled, authority both spiritual and civic. Conflicts arose too. Citizens quarreled with bishops over rights and taxes. Guilds disputed with priests over processions. Yet even in dispute, church remained central, impossible to ignore. In times of plague, churches filled with cries. Priests carried processions through streets. Bells tolled for the dead. Candles multiplied in sorrow. Faith was refuge when medicine failed. In joy, churches rang loud. Weddings spilled from doors with garlands and song. Baptisms brought infants wrapped in linen. Easter Mass filled aisles with flowers and alleluias. Children remembered First Communion forever, taste of bread, scent of wine, weight of mystery. For them, it was step into community, belonging sealed with sacrament. At night, churches glowed faintly. Candles flickered through shutters, watchmen passed with lanterns, prayers rose from monks. Even in sleep, city was never without its church. So amid crowded lanes and noisy squares, the church stood calm, constant, towering. It lifted eyes upward, softened hearts, measured hours, and gave shape to time. The church in city was not only building but soul. Its bells, windows, candles, and prayers bound all lives together, poor and rich, child and elder, laborer and master. Thus, in our medieval city, the church reigned above rooftops calling, consoling and reminding all who lived below that their days were brief, their souls eternal, their city but shadow of heaven. If the church gave the city its bells, the people gave it their voices. To walk medieval streets was to be wrapped in sound, a tapestry of cries, calls, laughter, and clangor. The city was never still, never silent. It hummed, clattered, and sang from dawn until night. At first light, cocks crowed in yards, their calls echoing against stone walls. Bells soon answered, ringing matins, their tones rolling across roofs and lanes. Doors creaked open, shutters banged, voices hold children awake. The day began in chorus. Merchants set up stalls with clatter. Boards dropped, barrels rolled, nails hammered into posts. Soon voices rose, bakers calling bread warm from ovens, butchers crying cuts of meat, fishmongers shouting catch of river. Their words were rhythm of trade, each voice honed to pierce crowd. Craftsmen added music of labor, smiths hammered iron, sparks flying with each strike. Coopers tightened hoops around barrels, wood groaning. Weavers thumped looms, shoemakers tapped nails, workshops spilled their rhythm into lanes, blending with vendors' cries. Animals made their own chorus. Horses neighed, hooves striking stone. Oxen bellowed, hearts rolled. Pigs squealed from pens. Geese hissed and honked. Dogs barked sharply. Chickens scattered, clucking, flapping wings. City was barnyard midst, much, much marketplace. Children laughter rang above. They shouted bays, sang rhymes, chased hoops down cobbles. Their voices, high and wild, softened harsh clang of work, proving joy survived even in narrow lanes. Water sellers howled through streets, their voices long and practiced, carrying far water fresh and cool as buckets sloshed, coins clinked, thirst quenched. The cry was familiar, their church bell. Town criers carried news, they beat drums or rang bells, then shouted decrees. A new tax, a festival day, a thief caught, a guild ruling crowds that, murmuring, laughing, cursing. Information moved not by page but by voice. Begging was constant sound, crippled men pleaded, blind women sang psalms, children kept quietly for bread, their voices cut through bustle, sometimes pitied, sometimes ignored, but never absent. Taverns poured sound into alleys, dice clattered, mugs banged, laughter roared, songs rose, drunken and merry. Music spilled out, fiddles, flutes, voices shouting chorus. The tavern was theater of noise lasting into night. Bells ruled hours, they though to mass, told council meetings, rang alarms in fire. Their tones varied, deep bass from cathedral, bright chime from parish, thin clang from small chapels, all blended into harmony of city time. Markets at midday grew loudest, vendors shouted prices, buyers haggled, children begged sweets, apprentices argued, guild officials barked orders, every voice strained to be heard above roar. To stand in market was to stand inside, ocean of sound. Quarrel often broke out, a dispute over weights, a shove-in crowd, a cart blocking lane. Voices rose sharp, curses flew. Sometimes fists followed. Crowds shouted encouragement or warning. Noise swelling until peace returned. Street performers filled corners. A jugged cried his tricks, a minstrel sang ballads, a storyteller spoke tales of saints and kings, children clapped, adults tossed coins, voices of wonder and laughter rose. Animals driven to slaughter cried harshly, pigs squealed, cattle lowered, geese hissed. Their sounds mingled with hammer of butcher cleaver, blending life and death in streets' daily music. In summer, windows open, sounds carried farther. Neighbors heard each other, quarrels, babies' cries, prayers whispered aloud, privacy dissolved in noise, community tied together by shared hearing. Winter muffled cities slightly, snow softening hooves and wheels, yet voices carried clearer in cold air, bells sharper, laughter crisper, children's songs echoed across frost and dusk. Rhythm shifted, vendors' cries faded, carts rolled home, smiths' hammers slowed. Voices grew softer, taverns louder, bells rocked end of day. Yet city never fell silent. Night had its sounds. Watchmen calling hours, dogs barking, drunks singing off key, shutters banging in wind. Silence belonged only to countryside, city hummed even in dark. Sound carried memory. Children grew knowing bells and calls, measuring time by voices. Visitors remembered city not by sights alone, but by roar that filled ears, lingering long after departure. Festivals multiplied voices tenfold, crowds shouted, cheers, minstrels played, choirs sang, preachers thundered, bells clanged without pause. City became storm of sound, overwhelming yet joyous. In sorrow, sound shifted, funeral bells tolled slowly, voices hushed, sobs carried through alleys. Even in grief, city spoke, sound mirroring soul. Thus city was instrument, played by hands of off, who lived within. Its bells and cries, its hammers and songs, its quarrels and laughter wove tapestry of noise that marked medieval life. The city was not quiet, it was alive with sound, every hour, every corner. It to live within walls was to live surrounded by voices, reminders that no soul was truly alone. If the ears were never idle in a medieval city, neither was the nose. The air itself carried stories of bread and fish, of smoke and dung, of spices from distant lands. To walk the streets was to be wrapped in a tide of scents, as delightful, as dreadful, all unforgettable. At dawn, the first smell was smoke. Hearths were lit, ovens stoked, forges kindled. The scent of wood and peat drifted through lanes, rising from chimneys and curling on beams. Smoke clung to cloaks, to hair, to walls. It was perfume of survival. For without fire, no meal, no warmth, no work could be done. Soon came the bread. Bakers filled streets with fragrance of loaves, golden crusts crackling, steam rising into morning air. The smell drew children like bees to honey. Even those too poor to buy paused to inhale deeply, satisfied by scent alone. Markets filled with sharper odors. Fishmongers laid out their catch eels twisting in tubs, herrings glistening on boards, salmon cut open to show red flesh. The smell was fresh in morning, harsher by noon, rank by dusk. Flies then and cats prowled close, adding their own scent of fur and musk. Butchers' stalls were worse. Meat hung from hooks, blood pooled in gutters, hides piled for tanning. Iron tang of blood mixed with stench of refuse, yet for those with coin, scent promised nourish, strength, and feast. Tinmeries gave city its foulest odors, hides soaked in pits of lime and dung, hair scraped, skins cured with urine, stench clung for streets around, acrid and sour. Neighbors cursed, but leather was needed, and so city endured. Not on was foul. Spice cellars transformed air. From open boxes rose cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, pepper. Their fragrance was wonder itself, hint of far-off lands, of caravans and ships, of kings' tables. To smell spice was to dream, even if purse could not buy. Herbs softened harshness. Women sold bundles of sage, rosemary, thyme, and lavender. Their scents promised healing, flavor for stews or charm against spirits. They sweetened air of markets, their fragrance a garden in midst of stone. The houses gave sour tang, yeast and hops brewed in barrels, froth spilling onto floors, mingling with smell of sweat and smoke. Drinkers carried scent into streets, laughter loud, breath strong with ale. Sweetmeats gave delight, honey cakes baked with almonds, candied fruit, roasted nuts. Their smell drifted on festival days, children tugging at sleeves for treat to the poor. A single sweet was feast enough, scent remembered long after taste was gone. Animals walked streets with constant presence. Horses left dung steaming, pigs rooted in refuse. Geese dropped freely, dogs left scent on walls. The city floor was mosaic of filth, its air rich with stench. Yet perfumes existed too. Wealthy women wore rose oil, jasmine, or musk. Nobles burned incense in halls, masking odor of smoke and sweat. On holy days, frankincense and myrrh drifted through churches, heavy and sweet, sanctifying air. Seasons changed scents. Spring vine, wet earth, fresh herbs, blossoms in garland. Summer thickened stench of fish and dung, heat ripening every odor. Autumn smelled of cider pressed, grain stored, smoke of bonfires. Winter brought sharper air, wood smoke strongest, bread most comforting. Inside homes, scents shifted. Poor households smelled of smoke, onions, and damp straw. Wealthy halls carried fragrance of spice, roasted meat, beeswax candles, herbs from gardens. Each threshold carried different air, telling wealth or want. In plague years, fear itself had odor. Fires burned herbs in streets, vinegar splashed on stones, flowers carried to nose. Yet beneath it lay scent of sickness, sweat, rot, death. The city remembered, its air heavy with sorrow. Festivals made air fragrant with joy. Meat roasted on spits, ale spilled, flowers scattered on streets. Candles multiplied, incense swung, pies baked, nuts roasted, scents mingled with music and laughter, filling city with delight. Guild halls had their own smells, bakers' halls rich with bread, brewers thick with malt, smiths pungent with coal and iron. To step inside was to know trade by nose before eye. Even water had scent, wells smelled of damp stone, buckets of iron, sometimes of rot when fouled. Fountains carried freshness, rare gift amid filth. Children splashed, breathing cool air scented with moss. Travelers remembered city by its smells, verboats by sights. They spoke of fish, dung, smoke, and spice, a mixture unique, unforgettable. To return after months away was to recognize city by scent before gate. For children, smells rocked memory. Bread in morning, honey cakes at fair, smoke of hearth at night. Even foul odors became familiar, part of life fabric, endured with laughter and shrug. Thus medieval city was kingdom of scents, each corner carrying its own fragrance, bitter or sweet, holy or foul, humble or rich. Air itself was storyteller, reminding all who lived within walls whiz they were, what they had, what they lacked. So the medieval city breathed through its smells and flavors. Smoke and bread, spice and dung, blood and honey, all mingled, all endured, all became memory that clung to every soul who walked its streets. Beneath the clamor of trade and the glow of festivals, the city carried its shadows, for per its bells and banners, life behind the walls was never wholly safe. Danger lurked in alleys, disorder broke out in squares, and fear moved Dee's swiftly bathed laughter. Pickpockets prowled crowded markets. Their fingers slipped into purses, tugged at sleeves, vanished into throngs before shouts could rise. Merchants kept hands on coin pouches, mothers clutched children close, guards watched sharp-eyed, yet thieves always returned, for poverty bred boldness, and crowds gave cover. Roars erupted easily. A quarrel over weights, a shove in narrow lane, a spilled cup of ale, suddenly fists flew, knives flashed, voices shouted, crowds that, how cheering, ah, fearing, until watchmen arrived with staves. Blows fell heavy, fighters dragged apart, silence returning vase swiftly weighed. Chaos had come. Taverns were notorious for strife. Dice rolled hot, ale flowed freely, tempers flared quick, a song turned sour, a boast turned insult, and benches overturned. Broken mugs and bruises were nightly fare, yet still the crowds returned, for drink and danger walked hand in hand. Night was risk-give off. When gates closed and lamps dimmed, watchmen patrolled, calling hours, yet shadows hid thieves, cut purses, and worse. Strangers hurried with cloaks drawn tight, prayers whispered with each step. Lantern glow was fragile shield against dark. Fires struck sudden fear, houses leaned close, beams dry, thatch brittle. A sea spark could leap from hearth to roof, turning lade into inferno. Bells rang alarm, buckets passed hand to hand, families fled with little more than lives. Ash and ruin ranked, city often, scars written in smoke. The nifisige revive, called them last with love kiss of lam yurt. Lam zather, the dinner fallegui at the warlans. Welcome and thank you for joining me for this quiet journey into the past. In the story, we will take a long, gentle walk through medieval Europe. There will be no rush. We will move slowly, pausing often, noticing details and lingering on the small things that made up ordinary life. Strangers drew suspicion, travelers with foreign cloaks, pilgrims with odd badges, jugglers with animals, all watched warily. Difference was danger, and rumors of theft or witchcraft spread quick. Some welcomed novelty, others feared it, city divided by curiosity and caution. Law kept order, but harshly. Stocks stood in squares, whipping posts near gates, gallows on hill beyond walls. Punishments were public, meant to warn. Children stared wide-eyed, thieves whipped, beggars branded, traitors hanged. Fear was teacher, visage priest. Guilds kept peace within trades, but rivalries still flared. Weavers quarreled with dyers, bakers with brewers, fishmongers with butchers. Pride boiled into violence, stalls overturned, knives drawn. Unity returned later, but scars remain. Women faced dangers too, crowded alleys, drunken crowds, and cruel words made journeys perilous. Many walked with kin or neighbors, safety in numbers, tales of saints protecting winds spread, prayers whispered on every errand. Children knew fear well. They saw brawls, smelled smoke of fires, heard bells toll for plague. Yet they also learned caution, darting away at danger, finding safety in doorways and neighbors' arms. Order was guarded by watchmen. They carried staves, rang bells, shouted hours. Some were diligent, others lazy or bribed. Their lanterns swung through lanes, shadows stretching long. Their voices were comfort and warning both. Festivals sometimes turned wild, crowds too thick, drink too strong, tempers too quick. What began in dance ended in fight, laughter shifting to fear. Yet by dawn, streets cleared, banners taken down, city pretending calm had never broken. Rummed spread disorder as fast his fists. A whispered theft, a cry of witchcraft, a claim of poisoned well, panic raced faster than watchmen. Crowds surged, stones thrown, fear turned to frenzy. Only bells and priests' voices could calm storm. Justice was uneven, the poor punished swiftly, the rich shielded by coin. Quarrels judged by guilds or councils often favored those with power. Resentment simmered, but life continued, for survival left little room for revolt. The rage de life gets knife, and Bayonne you at the Roman sting of the bad haze. Pussy, and then trick of coronate leap and remaster bolt of daffles. The city was sea shaken, yet never still, never drowned. Fear sharpened joy, bread tasted sweeter when hunger feared, festivals brighter after plague, peace more precious after brawl. Danger gave depth to delight, shadow making light more radiant. So medieval city lived with danger, Harlem, gauntlet companion, thieves prowled, fires burned, plague struck, fights broke, yet prayers rose, bells tolled, laughter returned. Life was fragile, but resilience strong. The city's soul was not safety, but survival. Its people walked amid danger, yet carried hope. Its streets echoed with quarrel and with song. Its alleys held fear and friendship alike. Disorder threatened, but never conquered. Thus the medieval city was both haven and hazard. Behind its walls lay safety from raiders and wolves, but also thieves, fires, and plague. To live there was to live between peril and promise, every day a balance of fear and faith. For all its dangers and burdens, the city was also a place of joy. Festivals turned its streets into theaters, its squares into stages, its people into actors in a drama of color and delight. No matter how hard daily toil, feast days reminded all that life could be more than survival. It could be celebration. The year was rocked by holy days, saints' feasts, Corpus Christi, Easter, and Christmas. Each brought processions, banners, music, and meals. The city calendar was not only of markets and councils, but of bells and garlands. Processions were most splendid. Banners of guilds waved, relics were carried high, priests swung cessers heavy with incense, choirs sang hymns, children scattered flowers, bells rang from towers, streets were strewn with herbs, their scent rising feet trampled them. For a day cobbles became holy path. Mystery plays drew crowds beyond counting. Wagons rolled into squares, each staging a scene of creation, of Noah Ark, of the Nativity, of Judgment Day guilds performed proudly. Bakers played Last Supper. Smiths forged nails of crucifixion. Fishmongers wrote Jonah whale to life. Laughter and tears mingled. Faith became theater. Tournaments filled fields beyond walls. Knights clashed in armor, lances splintered, horses thundered, crowds cheered, nobles feasted in pavilions, peasants gasped in awe. For men, it was only chance to glimpse chivalry, shining steel in sunlight. Markets became fairs, stalls doubled, jugglers performed, minstrels played, honey cakes, ribbons, toys, and trinkets overflowed. Children begged coins for sweets, women bargained for cloth, men drank, ate, and laughed. The air itself seemed lighter, filled with music and cheer. Dances filled evenings, maples rose in spring, ribbons twined children and youths spun in circles. In taverns fiddles played, couples stamped feet, hands clapped in rhythm. Even the poor forgot hunger for a night, lost in joy of motion. Fireworks were rare, but bonfires blazed often. On midsummer nights, flames leapt skyward, youths leapt through fire, sparks flew into dark. Songs rose, prayers whispered, laughter echoed. Fire was both symbol and spectacle, purging and delighting. Carnival turned order upside down, beggars dressed than kings, fools mocked, lords' masks hid faces. For brief days rules bent, laughter ruled, children stared wide-eyed, learning that even wrecked city could laugh at itself. Food rocked festivals, banners, loaves baked richer, meat roasted on spits, barrels of ale opened. poor who tasted only porridge on most days ate fat and sweet, their bellies full, their hearts light. Charity multiplied, wealthy gave coins and bread, guilds distributed alms, churches offered meals, for once hunger lessened, hands held gifts, smiles replaced worry. Music was constant. Pipes, drums, fiddles, lutes, voices raised in song. Hymns at dawn, dances by noon, tavern songs by dusk. City pulsed not only with work, but with melody. Children found marvels that ever return. Puppet shows told tales of saints and beasts. Jugglers tossed knives, dancers spun in bright skirts, trained animals performed tricks. Each sight etched in memory, carried for years bead brightest moments of youth. Even guild rivalries softened. Banners that once clashed in disputes now waved side by side. Masters drank together, apprentices cheered, journeymen marched shoulder to shoulder. Festival turned quarrels into fellowship. Pilgrims joined crowds, bringing badges and tales from afar. Their presence reminded city that joy stretched beyond walls, linking communities across lands. Night deepened, but joy lingered. Lanterns lit squares, torches flared, songs rose louder, taverns overflowed, lovers wandered, children fell asleep in deep and fair's arms, while laughter still rang. In times of sorrow, festivals shone brighter. After plague, after famine, after war, the return of laughter felt miracle itself. People wept, they sang, grateful for life, for bread, for one another. Festivals were remembered long after old men recalled tournaments of youth. Women remembered dances. Children grew old, telling of puppet shows they once saw. Joy became heritage, memory handed down. So medieval city lived not only in toil and danger, but in feasts and gatherings. Its streets became stage of faith, of laughter, of song, of color. For a day or a week, burdens lifted and life shone bright. Thus, festivals proved city's soul was not only labor and fear, but also joy. In banners and bonfires, in songs and sweets, people glimpse in heaven promise that even amid hardship, delight was theirs to share. When sun slipped beyond walls and last rays burned on rooftops, the city did not fall silent, it tamed its voice. Night brought two sounds, new dangers, and new wonders. Streets that bustled with trade by day grew strange and shadowed, filled with whispers and flickers of light. The gates closed with heavy groan, iron chains rattled, wood slammed, portcullis fell with et. No one left, no one entered, save those who bribed or begged. City became sealed world set apart from countryside beyond. Lanterns were lit at corners. Their flames wavered in breeze, casting long shadows of timbered walls. Pools of light fell on cobbles, but between them stretched darkness, deep-beat caves. To walk at night was to step from glow to shadow, never sure what eyes might watch unseen. Watchmen began their rounds, staves in hand, lanterns swinging, they carried hours aloud. 10 of the clock, and on is well Allah. Their voices reassured yet also warned, night belonged to thieves, much grudge to gods. Taverns filled with laughter, dice clattered, mugs slammed, fiddles played lively tunes, songs rose, bawdy and merry, spilling into alleys, for laborers, journeymen, sailors, tavern was hearth of night, where toil was forgotten in ale and song. The rare danger lingered, fights flared when drink flowed too freely, insults shouted, knives drawn, tables overturned, watchmen hurried, but not always swiftly. Blood sometimes stained tavern floors washed away by morning. Beggars sought corners to sleep. Wrapped in cloaks, curled against doors, they whispered prayers. Some huddled near churches, hoping for safety. Others found niches in walls. Their snores and coughs joined chorus of night. The wealthy retired behind bolted doors. Servants barred shutters like chests, checked fires. Candles burned in halls, prayers whispered at bedsides. For them, night was time of rest, danger held at bay by wood and iron. Children lay in straw, listening to sounds, outside barking, bells tolling hours, drunkards stumbling home. Dreams carried them through night, though cries of quarrel or cough sometimes woke them. Churches glowed faintly, candles flickered before altars, monks chanted night offices, psalms rising soft into air. Their voices mingled with silence, reminding city that prayer never ceased, not even when streets emptied. Lovers met in secret, shadows hid them, whispers carried in dark. They slipped through lanes, hearts quick, hands clasped. Night gave freedom, daylight denied. Thieves prowled alleys, their footsteps soft, their eyes sharp. They sought purses left loose, shutters unbarred, goods unwatched. Their whispers and movements were feared, yet never fully stopped. Fires glowed faintly in hearths, smoke curling into cold air. Families slept warm cougar, bodies close beneath blankets. Dreams filled homes of bread, of fields, of saints, of fears. Animals moved still. Cats prowled roofs. Dogs hunted rats. Owls hooted from towers. Horses stamped in stables. Pigs snorted in pens. Night belonged not only to people, but to beasts. Festivals made nights brighter. Lanterns hung from houses, torches lit squares, music and dancing lasted to dawn. Night became day, joy banishing dark. Children fell asleep on benches, lulled by fiddles and laughter. Winter nights stretched long. Candles guttered, frost crept on windows, wind howled through alleys. Families told stories by fire, voices soft, shadows long. Night felt endless, broken only by dreams and prayers. Summer nights were gentian, windows left open, stars glittering above, cool air carrying scents of herbs and rivers. Lovers walked longer, children whispered beneath blankets. city breathed easier. Plague years made nights fearful, silence ruled, broken only by tolling bells and weeping torches lit. Processions of dead shadows moved with grief. Night then felt heavier than day, filled with sorrow too vast for words. The red, even in fear, beauty remained. Stars above towers, moonlight on tiles, silence of cloisters, glow of lantern on cobbles. City at night was not only danger but wonder, mysterious and still. By dawn, watchmen go last hours, gates creaked, shutters opened, smoke rose anew, darkness gave way to day, and city awoke once more, noise and sense returning with light. The night in city was both peril and peace. It held thieves and lovers, prayers and quarrels, silence and song. It reminded all that life was fragile, but also that even in dark, hope glowed like lantern. Thus ended the day, thus began another. In medieval city, night was not absence but transformation, a slower, darker, stranger reflection of day, filled with dangers yet lit with wonder. Though youth pressed forward, childhood never vanished entirely. Its echoes lingered, soft lullabies hidden in memory, quiet chambers. On winter nights, when fields lay silent and fires burned low, adults still vethered hearths to share tales once heard's children. Legends of saints and heroes, of dragons and distant seas, stirred wonder anew. Listeners leaned closer, if they were once again children by the fire, eyes wide with belief. Simple joys endured in quiet corners of life. A song hummed while weaving cloth, a jest traded at the blacksmith forge, the smell of bread rising in the oven. Each carried laughter born in childhood, woven gently into daily toil. Memories found their way into labor. Farmers plow fields, remembered the games once played on those same ridges. Shepherds guiding flocks recalled how they once chased lambs in play. Even weary hands carried echoes of lighter days. Children who had grown into youth sometimes became teachers themselves. Older brothers guided younger ones across furrows. Sisters steadied smaller hands on spindles. The lessons they offered were more than skill. They were bonds of love, shaped by shared laughter from years past. Festivals also carried reminders, the ringing of bells, the rhythm of drums, the scent of roasted meats, the sight of children dancing in circles, all awakened memories in those now burdened with work. Smiles softened faces worn by toil, and hearts stirred with joy remembered. Even within cloisters and guild halls, innocence lingered. A novice at prayer might whisper an old lullaby under his breath. An apprentice carving wood might leave playful marks among careful cuts. In these hidden gestures, childhood continued, like a candle flame sheltered in still air. Mothers, too, carried echoes within them. When they soothed their own children, rocking cradles and singing soft hymns, they remembered being held once themselves. Fathers, when handing down tools, recalled the first time those tools had seemed too heavy in their own hands. Stories were bridges across generations, a grandmother tale repeated by a young mother, a lullaby carried from cradle to cradle. These made sure that childhood was never truly lost, only passed along. Even in sorrow, echoes of innocence returned, a familiar melody sung at a funeral, a childhood prayer whispered in fear of plague or war. Such moments remembered all that the child within them endured, seeking comfort and light. Seasons carried reminders too. Spring blossoms recalled games in meadows. Summer sun evoked laughter by rivers. Autumn winds stirred memories of chasing leaves, and winter snowflakes carried the hush of long nights by the hearth. Each season was both present and remembered. Thus, while childhood was brief in the Middle Ages, it was never truly gone. Its traces endured in song and story, in work and worship, in memory and hope. It was a flame hidden within the heart, small but steady, guiding even the heaviest burden. So youth became adulthood, and adulthood edged toward age. Each traveler carried with them an inner child, unseen yet alive. The laughter of game, the wonder of stories, the warmth of the hearth walked beside them, softening lifelong road. Childhood did not end, it echoed. It echoed in fields and cloisters, in guild halls and villages, in families and friendships. It echoed in prayer, in song, in story. It echoed in every heart, reminding each soul of villages their journey began.